I think one of the biggest barriers that I had to overcome as a kid was to be able to trust again. And Elizabeth, my foster mom, she did such a good job. She'd always support me no matter what, right? And when I made a mistake, it was fine. It wasn't the end of the world. And she would lovingly show me how I could do it different next time. She also took care of me. There was other foster kids in the home. There was her own kids as well. And she was married to a husband that was blind. And I love what you have on your wall here, adapt to survive. And that's what I had to do. I had to break down my walls and allow this family to raise me, not having fear of failure, right? That's one of the biggest things she taught me. Because she supported me so much, I was able to go out in this world and I was able to go and play football and I was able to be supported in doing that. I could have done anything in my life and I would have been supported. And that kind of gave me the belief in myself and allowed me to take life without the fear of failure.
Welcome everyone to the first episode of The Bouk. The book is the real story. We're welcoming real and authentic guests in the gym here at the Bouk Performance. First of all, I would like to thank SB Experience for the outfit. This is something that is close to my heart. Fashion is very important for me. They took on the challenge and decided to sponsor the show and provide outfits for me. So again, from the bottom to the top, I have some nice boots from brand Giorgio. It's crafted handmade from Italy. Real nice leather, very comfortable. And from my pants to the top, it's a brand called Martinique. It's from Denmark. Very comfortable. I was really impressed with the stylists at SB. They did a really great job picking my outfits, and they put me in comfort right away. So I'm very grateful for them. Another sponsor, Dedicate Kitchen in Martyr Loop. Amazing food. It's a couple from Newfoundland. Started a business in Fort Mac and came down to Calgary. They have a great concept. They do meal prep, but they also have a sit-down restaurant. They have an amazing staff, very caring staff, and do a really great job making you feel comfortable there. So if you ever have a chance, Dedicate Kitchen in Martyr Loop, you won't regret. I would like to start the podcast with welcoming my first guest. This is a guest that we've met over a decade ago when I moved to Calgary and signed with the University of Calgary Dinos. Didn't know what to expect, came all the way from Montreal. This was the first friend that I made here. I did know a guy on the team the name of Martin. I played with one of his relative, Loic, rest in peace. Passed away, but I knew that Martin when I moved in, but when I came here, but I didn't know anybody else. So when I came here, we connected right away. This is a person that I now call a brother. We've been through a lot together. We've been to a lot of different places, lived a lot of different experiences, and also a guy that I love playing with. He always came with the intensity. Probably the hardest hitter I played with in my life, 2'5" DC, Doctor Cassama. Welcome to the show. Really happy to have you as my first guest. And I'm really, really grateful that you took on the opportunity with me to start this show.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And this being the first episode of the book, I think it's special. And I think hopefully this first episode will be a trendsetter for your future guest.
Thank you.
And so I hope we can add value to the listeners. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here. So thank you for the invite.
No, thank you very much. I appreciate that. There's a lot. You have a pretty interesting story, and we'll kind of dive into that as we go. But I want to dive into the University of Calgary right away, and our experience there. You came a year before me, straight from Sweden, right? So I personally didn't know that they played football in Sweden when I moved here, and then you kind of introduced me to that. So talk to me a little bit about your experience coming here and your experience as a Dino.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I don't look like I'm from Sweden, but I did grow up in Sweden. And I always say to people, I was raised in Sweden, but I grew up in Canada because I did my high school and preliminary schooling in Sweden, which was great. And I ended up playing football when I stumbled upon it, right? It was one of those things, you're right, Sweden is mostly known for hockey and soccer,
That's right.
right? That's what they're good at. And IKEA, of course.
That's right.
But I happened to play football, American football in Sweden. I started when I was 12 years old. And I had some great coaches and some great mentors. And from a young age, I decided, you know what? I remember our coach, our high school coach, would have us watch these college tapes of the University of Michigan, Ohio State. And it was amazing for these young kids to play in front of 100,000 people. And so from a young age, I decided, you know what? My goal in life at the time was to earn a scholarship and go play football abroad in North America, right? And I so happened to play for the Swedish national team. And in 2009, I was playing the Junior World Championships in Ohio. And out of that tournament, I got different opportunities. So one was the University of Calgary, and then another opportunity down in the US. And for whatever reason, I came here to visit Calgary. First time in Canada, coming here from Sweden to see it for a week. And it was, I was overwhelmed by the kindness of the people here, but also the team was good. The coaches, we both played for Blake. He was an intense, but he was a good coach. And so, he kind of convinced me to come here, right? And funny enough, I saw him yesterday because he's visiting from UBC. And at the end of the day, I came here, and for me, it was a great decision.
For sure. I'm sure he's out here trying to recruit the next Doc Cassama. But when you came to Calgary, was your first impression of this city? When you come here and you come and visit is one thing, but when you come here as a student, what was your first impression walking the hallways and experiencing that for the first time?
For me, it was a new beginning, right? I mean, you know my story, and I'm sure you'll get into it. Being raised in Sweden, but coming here, it was a new beginning, but it was also one of the accomplishments that I wanted for myself in playing college football, playing football at a high level. So coming to Calgary, Calgary and Sweden are like the two opposites, right? I have a girlfriend now that moved from Sweden a year ago, and she reminds me every day, right? It's two different worlds. Right, Sweden it's very socialist, and they have a certain mindset in how they go about society. Calgary, I would say, is more conservative, right, and they have different values and so forth. So coming here was it was a shock, but it was an excitement because I was 18, 19 years old. And all I cared about at the time was, I'm gonna play football. I'm gonna make it to the pros, and school. I had to do well in school to keep playing. So, I came with the mentality of, I want to play right away, and so that was my number one goal. And I was able to play as a freshman, and did well for myself in my first year, and that kind of set me up where, coaches took care of me, and the team was really good to me, and so that was kind of the start of my football career in Canada, and it was an excitement for me.
The start of a great resume for yourself. Two-time first team All-Canadian, defensive MVP in 2013. Amazing career, right? And we talk about obviously your amazing career as a player, but the leadership aspect of the game that you brought as well on the team was amazing, And for me, the biggest thing when I watched you play is you were a calm guy on a day-to-day basis, calm, chill guy. I still remember that play. That was my second year playing DB, and we were playing UBC at home. and they had a running back called Deschamps.
Yeah.
And this guy was known to thump people. That
Yeah.
dude was going out there with bad intentions, right? And when you play in football, obviously when the running back runs and the gap opens, you know that if you wait for the running back to run through and you have your feet anchored into the ground and waiting for him, you're gonna get hit, right? And you're gonna end up being the nail. So when the gap opens, I remember gap opens. I remember playing halfback, and you're actually playing wheelbacker, but you're over top, you know, playing deep coverage. I remember the gap opening, and I was like, okay, well, this is my shot. I gotta go, right? But before I even put my first foot down, all I could see is you running right by me, and you hit the guy so hard that you didn't even lose a stride in the hit, and you just kept running. All I see is Deschamps flying and Doc just keep running forward and celebrating. And for me, that was one of the greatest hit live that I've seen in my life. How did that hit feel, and what was the chop process in that on that play?
It's funny you brought that one up. To this day, I think that was probably one of my best hits that was caught on tape, right? But it was one of those things for me, even as a kid, I took pride. I mean, you know, when you're a kid and you're playing football, you play every position, right? And I remember starting off in Sweden as a kid, and when I just started playing, and the coach had me play defense and offense, right? And my first game, I played running back. I remember, I think I scored 2 touchdowns, and one of the plays, as a running back, I got hit so hard, I started crying. And I'm like, why the heck would I do this to myself? Why would I want to get hit?
Yeah.
So then I told the coach, you know what, I just want to play defense, right? Because I didn't like to get hit, right? I rather do the hitting than get hit.
Smart man.
So I learned that as a young kid. But one of the players I tried to model my play after, I watched him ever since I was a kid, was Ed Reed. And I got the opportunity to meet with him. And you were actually there in LA when you were playing in the NFL. But I modeled my play after him. And so I took pride in, you know, making hard hits. But that exact play, I remember it like yesterday, is one of those perfect plays where, you know, you watch a lot of film in college. You watch a lot of film, and that's how you prepare for games, right? It's one of those plays where I had watched it on tape so many times. And so I read the play before they even called the snap. And I remember taking a couple of backpedal steps, and as soon as I took my second or third step, I could see it was a run. And I saw the run, and I saw, like, they blocked it pretty well.
Really well.
Like, the gap was
massive.
you know, we know when the gap is so big. And I'm like, okay, before it gets bigger, I better head down there. Right? And so I plant my foot, and I run full speed. And as I'm running, I'm like, either this is going to be the biggest hit of my life, or I'm going to miss the guy, right? And so luckily, I was running full speed, and I hit him so hard, I didn't break a stride. And it was one of those things, it just feels amazing, and you have so much adrenaline. And it's one of those things that you've just rehearsed, and you've watched it on tape, and everything just happened perfectly.
That's right. And to be honest, you talked about reading things perfectly. I think one of the big thing when we played, and I remember, is our preparation. You know, you went from playing defensive back to linebacker. Playing defensive back at UFC, being coached by Marcello Rapini, this guy taught me the true meaning of preparation, and that's something that I still apply to this day. And when you're prepared, it allows you to make plays like this. It's not always about athleticism.
Yes.
Right? When you get the higher level you get to, everybody's skilled, everybody's become more and more athletic and better at football. Now it's about being able to anticipate plays and prepare, right? And make sure that I remember going to games, it was easier than practices because we had watched the opponent so much. We always see Machado was always looking at there's an app called Huddle, and you could tell how much film you've watched, right? And you also have these goal sheets. I don't know if you remember the goal sheets, right?
Of course.
Where a few words weren't enough. It ended up being from a few words to 2 pages before the game. But when you got to game day, it allowed us to make a lot of plays and flash on film. How was the preparation process for you before games?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I'm still friends with Marcello to this day, right? And you're right. I mean, the guy we were very fortunate. He was a hard coach to play for, but we were very fortunate. And the reason why I say that is because he was one of those guys, and he's still involved with the program, but he played and had some success playing as a DB. And then he went on and had success in the business world, right? And I think the preparation, as far as how he prepared us, was he expected us to be great on the field, but also in the classroom. That's one of the things I'll never forget, because you never know, and you don't know it at the time, how long the game is going to last for.
That's right.
So he really took pride in us watching film, us making every workout, us getting good grades, right? Because he understood the value, and I didn't know it at the time. He understood the value in preparation, right? He understood the value in sacrificing for your team, because once you're done playing, once you move on as an athlete, those principles are going to apply in your life forever, right? And so that's really what he taught us, right? And I think that's why we were one of the best teams in the country every year when we played for him. But still to this day, football and the preparation that it took to play in games, those principles I still use to this day. Like, I still work out 6 a.m. every day, right? But when I was in college, I hated waking up 6 a.m. and going to the oval and running sprints and lifting weights. It wasn't fun, right? Whereas every other student, they're up having fun, they're up, partying, they're up doing stuff. But at the end of the day, I had, it was either that or you're not on the team.
That's right.
Right? So eventually you learn the principle of discipline. And knowing what I know now, without discipline, you can't achieve much in life.
That's right. And I think I agree with you that he taught us the art of preparation. But I think, obviously, there's a lot to our stories about football that allow us to get to where we were because we were prepared, right? We always worked out and prepared for whatever the opportunity presents itself. But I think what Michelle did is he taught us the importance of consistency in that.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
And how to prepare properly and do it consistently, right? And which allowed us to have success. Every time you see red on the field, you knew we were coming with some for you, right? Yeah. We were always coming prepared. We always come in with a certain type of confidence, not confidence about our abilities, but about our preparation. And we knew who we were playing. We knew what we had to do, and we knew how to play the game the right way, and we did it consistently. And obviously, we talk about Michelle, but there's also a lot of other coaches that taught us that at UFC. But talking about your experience at UFC, I want you to think about a moment at UFC where you felt like you're at your best. Nothing could touch you. You're playing your best football, and why?
Oh man, that's a really good question. When I felt at my best,
I think I remember, but I want to hear if I'm on track.
When I felt at my best, I mean, I would say obviously 2013, I was recognized as one of the best players in the country. I would say like 2013, I like that year, interesting enough, I probably had my best season in my career at the university level. And what most people don't realize is the year before, 2012, was probably my worst season that I felt like I played personally. And the reason for that, I had torn my ACL in 2011, right? And I tore my ACL, so I was 1 year removed from the game. And I came back in 2012, and, you kind of had to find yourself again as a player, So it was a struggle. And I remember after that year, 2012, like, I wasn't sure if I wanted to play football anymore. I remember talking to some of my mentors. I'm like, I don't know if this thing is for me. I don't have the love for the game anymore. I feel like doing something else. I feel like
This
quitting.
the year we met.
Yeah, 2012. That's right. That's right. I feel like just I don't want it anymore, right? But anyways, at the time I had no other options, right? I was an international student from Sweden.
On scholarship.
Right? I was on a scholarship, so either I'm playing football or I lose my scholarship, right? And I don't have the money to pay for school myself, right? So I was left with one option, keep playing at the time, right? That's how I saw it. So whatever, so I'm like, anyway, so, I come fall camp, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep going, right? So it comes 2013, we start training camp, and we're training, and I was playing DB at the time. Somebody got hurt, and now they want to switch me from a halfback to linebacker, and I'm like, I don't really care. I mean, do what you want to do, right? And so I switched positions, and that season, I interesting enough, I didn't really put any pressure on myself. I didn't really put any goals as far as like I want to be the best player in the nation or anything like that. I just took it as it came, if you will, right? And I remember we had a teammate that year that passed away, unfortunately, and he was one of the nicest guys. But that really shook me to the core, and I made me realize that this life that we live is not forever, right? And make sure that you make the most of the opportunities that you have, the days that you have, right? And so I just approached every day as far as like, let me make the best of this day, right? And I think I took more of a leadership role with the team, but I played very free. I didn't care about being an All-Canadian. I didn't care about winning national championships. And that was the year I had my best season.
You care more about, it sounds like you care more about the process of the day-to-day process
Exactly.
than the outcome.
Exactly.
And that's something a lot of people, sometimes when you have we often, as athletes, we always have the big goal, right? And a lot of times we always got to keep in mind that the big goal, there's a lot of things that are out of our control. In order for us to achieve that goal, and we get so attached to the end goal, and then when adversity hit, you get shook and you don't know how to respond because you start fearing about how am I going to achieve the next goal instead of thinking about day to day, what's happening right now, what can I do about it right now? Right?
Exactly, and that was one of the key differences, right? And knowing what I know now, right? I read a lot of books on as far as business books and psychology books, but when you approach life and when you approach like I did that season, I approached the days by how can I make the most of this day, right? As opposed to let me chase that All-Canadian. Let me chase being a pro player. I just wanted to have the best practice for today, right? And it changed the outcome,
Definitely.
right?
Is that the year when you came out with the song?
I mean, it's funny, that whole story, like the song, that actually my roommate first year, Eric Deleski, he kind of made that song up, right?
Was it the first year or was it a bit later?
That song, he kind of made that up from our first year, right? And the reason why that he made that song is because Ed Reed, again, my favorite player, right? He actually made a song when he played for the University of Miami.
Yes, sir.
he basically took that song and put my name in it, right?
Yes, sir.
And so, but
What
he
you
started.
know about me, boy? 2-5 DC, boy. The best DB, boy. Knock you off your feet, boy.
That's funny.
That song, to be honest, to the fact that I still remember it to this day.
Yeah.
That when I heard that song the first time, I was like, that's dark. That is dark right there. And every game you played, that's you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the way you played the game. And you played the game fearless, but you also played the game with pride, you know?
Yeah.
And sometimes people look at pride as sometimes as a bad thing. But in order for you to have success in life, you have to have a certain sense of pride. And obviously there's a threshold to that becomes more the ego side and the bad side of it, pride. But I don't know if you can achieve true success without having pride in what you do.
Yeah, I would say more so for me, it was a belief in myself.
That's right.
Right, and that started for me at a young age. You know, through circumstances in my life, I kind of developed the belief in myself, and I was ignorant enough or crazy enough to believe that I can change, the outcome of my workouts, the outcome of getting stronger, the outcome of making plays when I had to. Right.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at your career and the evolution of your career, I think 2013 was that spark for you in terms of what you can achieve on the football field, but it's also an opportunity for you. And I've seen you grow as a person throughout 2013, 14, 15, all the way through. And talk to me a little bit about that process after that year when you get recognized as the Canada West Defensive MVP and the rest of the career. How did you continue? Did you approach each day the same? Did you change anything about your preparation?
Yeah, I think a lot of learnings that year, right? A lot of learnings. And one of the things that I realized with my injury, 2 years prior to that, is that this game is not gonna last forever, right? This game is not gonna last forever. So I started preparing myself on the field, but also off the field, right? I had some great people that came into my life, honestly, and they opened up my perspective that. Football is not going to last forever. So I try to live every day with the understanding that I have to make the most of it, right? After that year, 2012, right? Obviously, I went into the NFL draft in 2014 because of the season that I had. And, and that was a great experience. I ended up getting an agent that was in Chicago at the time, and he had played in the NFL, and they saw me somehow in Canada and wanted to sign me up. So I went through that whole journey of, okay, I had the most amazing season, and we went to the national championship. And we ended up losing, and that was hard. But then right away, I was training for the NFL draft, right? And so going through that experience of the draft and preparing for that, that was a fun experience. But I was also, which I didn't know at the time, which, it's crazy to think of. But think of it this way. I had the best season of my life, but during that season, I suffered an injury.
That's right. I was about to attack that a little bit. Go ahead.
Exactly. So during that season, I suffered an injury. And at the time, it was diagnosed as a meniscus, but it was way worse than that.
That's right. I want to add to that because I remember a year after that, I remember I think we were in the car, and you caught me off guard to where you're talking about an injury. I'm like, I said, what injury? Because you didn't miss games. You played every game. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He said, Bouk, I don't have an ACL. I said, what do you mean you don't have an ACL? I don't have an ACL. Since when? I think at the time it's been like a year and a half. You've been playing football without an ACL.
Yes.
So you went through the season, you went through the combine training, you did your pro day, you did an other season with no ACL.
Yeah.
To me, that was a testament of how mentally tough you were. You know, especially when you were told you're gonna have one, right? It's the one thing to play without one.
Yeah.
And when you're told you don't have one, you still play the game.
And that's very interesting point you just made, right? Because I was hurt, and I was told at the time that my meniscus was the one that I hurt.
Yeah.
So I kept playing, thinking that it's only my meniscus.
Yeah.
Right? And so I played the whole season, and after the season, now I'm preparing for the NFL draft, but my knee is still swollen, and it kept getting swollen from training and stuff. So I'm like, okay, something is not right. So I go in and I have it checked, and they do an MRI, and the doctors tell me you don't have an ACL in your left knee. Like, what do you mean I don't have an ACL? I just played the whole season. I was just, the defensive player of the year. What do you mean I don't have an ACL? And they're like, yeah, you don't have an ACL from the MRIs and from the test, but it's a rare. It's one of those rare situations where your hamstring is so strong, it's compensating for the lack of no ACL. And keep in mind, this is the second time I hurt my ACL, not the first.
Is that the same one or the other one?
The other one.
The other one.
Right? First time I hurt my ACL, I had surgery within a month because I couldn't play on my right knee. Yeah. Second time, it was my left knee. But I had just played the whole season. And I kept training. And so I walk into my doctor's office, he's like, yeah, you have no ACL, but you can still function. I'm like, how can I function without an ACL? And it's like, it happens in rare cases where your hamstring just compensates. Keep in mind, this is like 4 months before the NFL draft. And I'm thinking, okay, well, what am I gonna do? Am I gonna quit training for the draft? Or do I keep going? Because I can function, I can play, I can do all of these things. Obviously, there's stuff that bothers me, but I can still play and do things at a high level. And but to your point, once I found out that I had no ACL, now it became real. Now I know now that I'm playing. I just played without one, and I'm training for the NFL draft without an ACL.
And then what made you decide to keep going?
Ooh, that is a great question.
Because to me, that is the biggest, obviously at that point, you didn't know.
Yes.
Now you found out. And then that's when I feel like a lot of anxiety kick in, right? A lot of fear, anxiety kicks in, especially that you've been through it already. You know what it feels like.
For sure.
Right? You know, remember what the surgery feels like and all these different things. Now going through, obviously you have to prepare for the combine, and then now you know that you're going to have to keep playing football and there's no ACL. What made you make that decision to keep going?
Great question. I was 22 at the time, and I remember just sitting there and when I was at my doctor's office, and this is actually a couple of days after the NFL draft, after my NFL pro day. I had just had a pro day. I ran a great time, and I tested really well at this pro day. And then I saw my doctor afterwards, and he tells me that you have no ACL, but so they do all of these things, like they do a psychological test, and they do an MRI and all this stuff, right? And I scored really high in the psychological test because the way they measure it is like, do you have any fear that you're gonna hurt yourself? Knowing that you have an injury, and then they do the physical test as well. I was in my doctor's office, and I'm like, and funny enough, I walk into his office. He had a newspaper in his office, and my face was in the newspaper because I just had a great pro day.
Yeah. I
And
think the Steelers were there too that day.
Yeah, the Green Bay Packers was there.
Green Bay Packers.
And funny enough, I saw my doctor Nick like yesterday at one of the tennis clubs. Anyways, so I'm in his office and I'm like, what? And he says, Doc, I see you had a great pro day. I mean, your face is in the newspaper. He's like, but I have some bad news for you. Like, your ACL is gone, but with all the tests that you did and the way you're performing, I don't recommend you do surgery right now. And I thought about that. I'm like, if I do surgery right now, everything that I've worked for, all the stuff that I've done, it's gonna stop immediately. But the fact that I have the confidence and I can still run and do things at a high level, although I don't feel 100%, but I can still perform at a high level. I decided for some reason that let me just keep going, right? And through a lot of thinking and whatnot, and talking to a lot of different people, I'm like, I can still play at a high level, so let me just keep going, and maybe do the surgery, if needed, right? Yeah.
And to me, that's a true testament of your perseverance, but also your mental fortitude to be able to continue to play despite this adversity and continue not just to play at a high level, right? And not be timid and go out there and play. Obviously, there has to be a few adjustments through your schedules to make sure that there's some information that you have to deal with on a weekly basis that you have to. It was like a cycle every week, right? You play the game, low information, it comes down, you go back and play and back and forth and be able to go through that over and over again. To me, that's something that I have a lot of respect for you to this day. It's not easy, to go through that and knowing that and still going out there and do it at a high level. And obviously, after football, you transitioned into a new sector of your life. Actually, you went into the business world. But before we get into that, because I really want to dive into that. We have a really special bond, you and I, because we kind of followed each other along from college all the way to here to this day. Everywhere I went, you were always there. I went to Arizona. I went after this, I finished. I went to Arizona. You came visit me. I went to LA together. We went to SAS together. We went everywhere. You went back. You're the only person from Calgary that has been into my home.
Yes.
Right? And I'm very grateful for that. But on top of that, I've also had the opportunity to go see you and go see your family in Sweden. And that was a trip that I will never forget. There was a special experience for me because you've always talked to me about your stories and your brother. I remember when your brother came to visit you at the time. I think Lamin came.
Yeah, both of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
They came, and so I met them, but your story was so special to me because of the complexity of it a little bit. And I want to dive into that. So we're going to rewind a little bit. Before the dinos, originally born in Gambia.
Yes.
And then you ended up moving to Sweden. And I want you to share a little bit about that process from being from Gambia, moving to Sweden, and entering the foster system there. I want you to talk to me about that, please.
For sure. You know what? I consider myself very lucky, and I own my story now. But growing up, you're right. I was born in Gambia, a small country in West Africa, right? And I was there until I was 7 years old, right? My parents were separated. My mom was there. My dad was in Sweden. So at 7 years old, my parents had decided that me and my brothers are moving to Sweden to live with my dad. And so we moved to Sweden, and it is quite interesting to move to a completely different country, right? coming from Gambia, which is like 30 plus degrees. Remember landing in Sweden in December 1998, and it was like first time seeing snow, you know, and it was a whole different world. Like I was on the plane with like a t-shirt, and as soon as we land, like I had to get jackets and you know, winter boots and trek in snow, right? And so that was a shock, right? That was a shock. And we grew up with our dad, me and my two older brothers. We grew up with him in Stockholm, Sweden, and through circumstances, right? One of the things that happened in our home, well, with our dad is, and this is very common with when you grew up in Africa, but when kids don't obey, right, you give them a whipping, right? And so when we lived in Stockholm with our dad, you know, when as kids, the way he would discipline us, and he would beat our ass, right? Literally,
For sure.
right? He
I've
would
been
beat
there
our
a few
ass,
times.
and so he, you know, so we would get beatings at home, and you know, we ended up going to school one day, and I think me and one of my brothers had a mark on his body, and they asked, you know, what's that on your arm or whatever. And I think it was my brother, and he's like, yeah, my dad beat my ass at home. And they're like, what? Sweden is very different from Gambia,
sure.
right? Whereas there, that's against the law.
For sure.
You can't beat your kids, right? And so what happened is the teachers found out, and so now all of a sudden they're calling social services, and that are now coming to school. And so they come to school and they talk to all three of us brothers, and we didn't know any different. We're like, yeah, we get our ass beat at home. That's normal, right? But that's against the law. So now we can't go home. And, you know, I remember the police coming to school, and we basically had an entourage back to my dad's house, and we were just packing our stuff, and we were moving away from there. And that's how we ended up in foster homes.
So the one thing about that I want to kind of go back to a little bit is the culture. You know, for us, obviously, I'm also African descent. You know, this is something very common in our home, especially growing up. And this doesn't take away about, there's still love there, you know, and the parents love us, you know, that's just the way things were done at the time, you know, and that's how we get disciplined, you know. And how did you perceive that coming from Gambia going to Sweden? Because for you, that's probably something very common.
Yes.
Right? So how did you perceive that when they say, okay, because of X, Y, and Z, that's very normal to me. Now I gotta be removed from my home, and then I have to enter the foster system.
For me, it was a shock because none of us wanted to move away from our dad. Right? It wasn't. Like I said, it was such a shock. And as a kid, you know, I was 8, 9 years old at the time. Like my dad's home and in Stockholm, that was my comfort. That's what I knew, right? I didn't want to move away from there, right? But because of the way the laws work in Sweden, that was strictly forbidden. You can't discipline your kids that way. And so by no fault of us as kids, we had no choice. We had to move. And so social services at the time, I remember we had to move to one family where all 3 brothers stayed, and this was just temporary. And until they found a long-term solution, what was more difficult was, you know, obviously moving away from our dad was very difficult. But then going to a home where the 3 brothers are together, and this lasted for about 6 months because we're all different ages. I was the youngest. I have a brother that's 2 years older and one that's 4 years older. And after 6 months at this home, all of a sudden, social services decided, okay, all 3 brothers are going to different homes because there wasn't a family that could take all 3 of us. And that was very difficult because now as a 9, 10-year-old, it's like, I don't know anybody in this country. I just moved here a couple of years ago, and now all of a sudden, my brother's going to one home, my other brother's going to one home, and then I'm going to a third home. And I don't know these people, right? And so as a kid, when you go through that world, you don't really know who to trust, right? And that was the most difficult part because, you're growing up, and initially you're coming to these homes and you don't know these people, so you have a very hard time trusting. And so that
Especially you add to the fact that you're kind of trusting the system is also already in jeopardy right there from the move. Now you got to move with people that you also don't know and don't trust.
Yeah.
Right. That must have been really difficult for you, especially at that age where you also don't have the maturity and the knowledge to know how to handle these situations. Right.
Yeah.
And the thing that we always in life, we always have this anchor, right? It's something that anchors us, that the stability for you was removed, right?
Yes.
How did you navigate that, and how were you able to maintain some type of like a relationship? Because you said in foster, I remember we had this conversation before. As you said, the difference between adoption and foster system is,
Yes.
as a foster kid, you feel like this is temporary. Then
Yes.
you're gonna go back. When you get adopted, it's more like a final thing.
Yes.
So how did you navigate the next few years of your life, knowing that you were potentially going back home?
For sure. So I would say one of the things that happened, because remember we lived in Stockholm, and then social services in Sweden found a home for me in the south of Sweden, which is called Skåne, and it's a small town called Kristianstad. So I go from a capital city to, a little small town, which is like in the middle of nowhere.
You call it a village.
A village,
Yeah.
right? A village. That's the
Because
right
I remember
word,
going there with you.
right? And so going to that village, but you're right. So one of the things I moved to a home and with a foster mom named Elizabeth and a dad named Getachew. And they had kids of their own, but they took me in as a foster kid. And at this time, I was 10, 11 years old. And so what would happen is I had to now move in there and grow up with my foster family. But then on weekends, every month or so, I would go visit my dad in Stockholm. So I would either take the train or I would fly to Stockholm, right? And so, because the difference when you get adopted, you live permanently with your new family. As a foster kid, the idea is, with my dad is eventually, he's gonna learn from his mistake. And abide by the laws in Sweden, and then we can move back to him, right? That was the whole plan. So we would go visit, every month or so, and so it was very difficult because I go there and I'm like, I want to stay with my dad, but then I have to go back to the foster home, right? And then you learn as a kid, you start learning what's good for you and what's not good for you. And I consider, like throughout this whole story, I consider myself very lucky. And that's what I want to come across with this story. And the reason why I say I consider myself very lucky, because the family that I came to, my foster mom and my foster dad, amazing people.
Oh yeah.
And you've met her. Still to this day, I'm closer to my foster mom Elizabeth than my own parents, because I grew up there since I was 11 years old. Like I call her mom, and she's the most influential person in my life to this day, right? But at a young age, I realized that the situation at my dad's wasn't gonna improve. So at age 12, I stopped making those visits. I stopped going to Stockholm and seeing him. And
did you still stay in contact with him?
Yeah, from time to time, right? But what I realized, my foster mom did such a good job. She allowed me to open up, and I grew up in two different worlds. She was one of those. She's one of those amazing women that taught me. I guess she opened up my heart to start receiving and trusting again, right? Which allowed me to grow up in a wonderful home, and she poured so much love into me. I started trusting her, and I started opening up. And the difference was she would still discipline me, because when you're initially as a foster kid, or when you go through that trauma, you just like I when I first came there, I wasn't listening to anybody. I kind of did whatever I wanted and whenever I wanted, right?
You still don't.
And still, maybe. That's right. I'm
just joking.
No, that's funny. I'm very selective. I'm more selective now, right?
Yeah.
I'm more selective. But my point of the story is, she taught me. She would, she kind of turned my life around by the way she loved me.
That's right.
Right? And I realized that she would still discipline me when I wasn't obeying, but in a loving way.
That's right.
Versus what I grew up with before. So I started learning that, okay, this environment that I'm in now is much better for me. And so I kind of gave into that. Yeah.
And when you gave into that, I think that was because in life, when we get into an environment, both parties have to adapt, right? And obviously she had to adapt to you and you had to adapt to her. And that adaptation piece for you was probably your breakthrough in allowing yourself to thrive in that environment, right? Once you were able to go through this barrier, right? This mental barrier that you had, an emotional barrier as well. What was your experience there, and how were you able to grow from that to be the person that you are today?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest barriers that I had to overcome as a kid was to be able to trust again. And Elizabeth, my foster mom, she did such a good job, and she installed certain principles in me. She'd always support me no matter what, right? And when I made a mistake, it was fine. It wasn't the end of the world, and she would lovingly show me how I could do it different next time, right? And so one of the principles that she taught me, she was a fearless woman, and what I mean by that, she worked very hard. She worked at the hospital as a delivery nurse, and but she also took care of me. There was other foster kids in the home.
That's right.
There was her own kids as well, and she was married to a husband that was blind, right? And so I grew up in a home where, I say this now, that I was raised by women, right? I had a foster sister that was a couple years older than me. She because it's hard for her own kids as well, because they have to adopt to a foster kid coming in.
Yep.
So it was me, there's two foster kids, me and another guy, and then her own kids. So everybody had to adapt to it, right? And I love what you have on your wall here, adapt to survive. And that's what I had to do, right? I had to adapt. I had to break down my walls and allow this family to raise me, right? And to love me. Also, one the principles that she taught me as far as not having fear of failure, right? That's one of the biggest things she taught me. So because she supported me so much, I was able to go out in this world, and I was able to go and play football, and I was able to be supported in doing that. I could have done anything in my life, and I would have been supported. And that kind of gave me the belief in myself, and allowed me to kind of take life without the fear of failure.
For sure. And I still remember, I will never forget the opportunity I had to be in her home, and because she's still fostering kids to this day,
Yeah.
and I was wondering, who are these people? So no, this is what she does, and I didn't speak, we couldn't conversate because she doesn't speak English and I don't speak Swedish.
Yeah.
But you may not always remember what people say, but you remember how they make you feel. And she made me feel so comfortable and so loved, even though we just met. The passion and the love she has is a gift, and I'm very grateful that you had the opportunity to meet her, because I know from knowing you and seeing her, she changed your life, and she's an amazing woman, which the way she disciplined you and gave you the opportunity to try again allows you to lose that fear of failure and always that anxiety of what happened if, it's called, sometimes I feel in our culture we experience conditional positive regards, meaning that the love sometimes that we get is conditional to us doing X, Y, and Z, right?
Yes.
You need to succeed in school. If not this, unfortunately, sometimes that creates some anxiety, right? And fear of failure. But because you had that unconditional positive regard and that unconditional love will allow you to break through a lot of those barriers, being going to UFC, different country, going to your first ACL, rehabbing from that, going having a tough year in 2012, bouncing back, going to 2013, becoming defensive MVP, tearing another ACL, going through this process again, and finishing your career as an All-Canadian again. I think that a lot of that had to do with the love that she gave you and the belief in you the belief that she instilled in you.
Absolutely. And you said the word. You said unconditional love.
That's right.
And that's what I felt from her. And that, that experience, the love that she poured into me, allowed me to go out in the world and do whatever I wanted. Because, ultimately, love is the greatest thing. And when you have people that love you and support you no matter what, it allows you to go out and do amazing things.
That's right.
So that's why I consider myself very lucky, right? Because a lot of people look at my situation and they say, that it wasn't the most, initially it wasn't the most, it was a scary way initially to grow up and be removed from your home and having to go and live with strangers, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't always turn out great, right? There's a lot of people that go through the foster system. It doesn't turn out great.
That's right.
Unfortunately. But I consider myself very lucky because I grew up in the most loving home. Yeah, I wasn't with my biological parents, but I found new parents. And I grew up in a great environment, which to this day, that's why who I am and the way I am today. It's because of the love that I received growing up.
Definitely. And thank you for sharing this, and I think, it took us many years for me to have the opportunity to see and witness, and we've had a lot of deep conversations, in our journey together, and we've also that's something that probably we kind of went back and forth for years on that nature versus nurture component of things, and we've always kind of wondered what's more important, who you come from biologically or the environment that you're in, what has more a bigger impact. And I think it depends on the person. I think there's always two components, and for some people, one is higher than the other, but in the end, it's two things that always shapes a person. And then for you, the environment that you're able to be raised. Obviously, I would still believe I met your siblings, I met your father. I think there's still some component of them that you have in you.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
I think that you are, very determined people as well in that side of the family, but you also being impacted, by your foster mom, Elizabeth, in a very, very strong way.
For sure. One of my fascinations in college, I did a minor in psychology, and I was, and maybe it's because the way I grew up, I was always fascinated with the question, what shapes you the most, nature versus nature, right? Nature versus nurture. And for me, I would say, growing up the way I did, I was so shaped by the environment that I grew up in. I was so shaped by it. It allowed me to come and move to a Calgary and adapt.
That's right.
Right, it allowed me to come here and adapt because it's so different from Sweden. I adapted with playing Canadian rules of football versus American rules. I adapted coming to university from talking Swedish every day in Sweden to now having to talk English. I didn't know a single person in Calgary.
That's right.
Right, she allowed me to adapt, and it taught me a principle in life, I think, that life doesn't happen
to you.
It happens for you.
Yep.
Right? And once you realize that, you can live with a sense of peace.
That's right. And that also, when I saw you transition from the football world to the business world, I didn't see any panic. Or maybe you were hiding it well. I didn't see any panic. I feel like you transitioned really well and you adapted to it. And for me, that when I saw you enter that world, he's just gonna do whatever Doug does. He's just gonna go out there and succeed because that's how he lived his life. Whatever obstacle that came his way, he took it as an opportunity to grow and succeeded regardless of it, right? So when you look at it, but it does not mean, even though we talk about all the successes you had, it does not mean that failure doesn't happen, right? And it happens for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that failure is a learning tool and a learning opportunity for all of us, right? And I know that, there's been ups and downs in your personal life, in football, and in business, and I want to attack, the business side of things a little bit more right now before we end the show. Can you talk to me a little bit about the process of going to business?
Yeah.
You've made a few transitions and ended up being in the position that you're in right now in franchise development, right?
Yes.
So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. You made a point as far as failures, and some people see it as failures, but I have a principle that I learned in college, and it was from seeing John Maxwell, and it stuck to me. And I think it was like second or third year of college. I was able to see John Maxwell on stage here in Calgary. He said something that really stuck to me, and I kept it to this day. Sometimes you win, and sometimes you learn. Right? So when I made a transition into business, I made it at full speed, just like anything else.
Like how you play football.
just like anything else. I graduated college, and I went into business for myself. I didn't work for anybody, right? And in hindsight, that's very risky. Right, because a lot of people that go into business, they go the route of working for somebody and they learn, and then eventually, they gain the confidence to then go into business for themselves. I guess that was a bit of a risk, right, to do what I did in graduating college. And then go into business for yourself. And the first business I ever started was a tech company. And And that whole experience was learning as far as like I raised a bunch of money to start this tech company, and I worked really hard at it, and it didn't work out the way I wanted, right? That was the first business. But as opposed to just saying to hell with it, I just kept going. I adapted. So at age 28, still I had very little experience in working for other people. I had worked for a couple of companies in between that transition from building the first tech company to transitioning and doing something different. At age 28, in a partnership with other people, we bought a company. We acquired a company here in Calgary for about $900,000, and this is a company that had been around for many, many years. And I was very young at the time. We acquired a company that has a bunch of staff, and now I have to adapt again.
That's right.
Because I'm put in a position where I'm running this company, and it happened to be a franchise company, and I'm having to learn a lot of things. Now, I remember having a CFO that was in his 60s, and all of a sudden he reports into me. And I don't even know half of the shit that's going on in the company, right? But again, you either adapt or you don't survive, right? So now I have to adapt again, right? And through that whole learning experience, going through that and being thrown into things, I always had the belief that things would work out.
That's right.
Right? So that's kind of how I stumbled upon franchising. And as you mentioned to now, right, I'm now in the, I've learned from those experiences, and I've, had a couple of years under my belt now in learning businesses. But yeah, I've lost a lot of money trying different things, right? And I've had to I've had to overcome myself. I've had to overcome I guess the moments and the things that didn't work out, right? Those moments have taught me so much. So yeah, now I'm starting a consulting company within franchising, and I'm helping businesses franchise, and I'm helping investors find the right investments within franchising. But I was not able to do that unless I went through those learnings, right? Unless I went through those learnings, unless I failed so many times in business, and learning the finance side of business, learning how to hire, learning how to manage, I was thrown into it, and I failed a lot of times. But if I hadn't gone through that, I wouldn't be in the position now where I can speak into somebody's life, which I wish I had somebody that could speak into my life before I acquired that company at $900,000. I wish I knew some of the things that I have now back then, right? And so in life, I think, we all have gone through experiences, right? But if you can learn from those experiences, for every, call it, and this is another thing, for every failure, I think there's an equal or greater opportunity.
That's right.
And the opportunity for me is to take what I've learned and now help other people make the right choices in starting businesses.
That's right. And that's beautiful that you said that. And not to just come back to the year in 2013 when you came and went in and focusing more on the journey than the outcome. And when you're on the other side, and obviously now you're having success in what you do, you realize that the journey was the most important. And not obviously you got to you reach an upper echelon in your career, but the journey is what allowed you to get there. And I don't think that when you started, you ever thought that you were in position right now helping other businesses
Correct.
Grow, right? So, and that's just, that's the great thing about sports that I feel like we learn a lot is learning how to deal with failures, because we, I remember that's the thing when we practice. Obviously, at the time I played receiver, and you played defensive back. I always loved going against you. For me, I was a bit selective. You only get 4 or 5 one-on-one reps at practice, right? And I was very selective who I wanted to go do one-on-ones with, because I wanted to get better, And you have to lose that fear of losing to be able to thrive, and be able to get better. And I wanted to go against you, because I know, okay, I better buckle up, I better strap up and get ready, because I might lose if I don't come prepared, right? And that's what made us better along the way, exposing yourself and you being fearless, going to business on your own, starting, failing, getting back up, failing, getting back up. You didn't take the safe route, going in, getting, nothing against that route. I just don't think that at the time that's something that you wanted. You wanted something more for yourself, and you had a high expectation. But with these high expectation, there's more risk, right? But at the end of the day, as long as you keep your head down, focus on the process, great things happens on the other side. You right now working with businesses and helping them grow. And that's something, I think you know me well enough now to know that I like to paint pictures, and I like analogies, right? The biggest thing we both play DB, so that's something that for maybe the audience that didn't play football, you may not relate as much to the analogy, but you'll understand the term that we use is, as DB, what is the most important thing do you think we need to have when we start, when the whistle blows? When is the most important thing that we need to focus on? One of the most. I wouldn't say the most, but one of the most.
What is one of the most important things we need to focus on?
When you play DB. Let's say I call cover one.
Yeah. I mean, you have to focus on the man in front of you.
That's right.
Yes.
I think the biggest thing I learned at playing DB is the value of leverage, And a lot of times people forget that piece when they get into business, is the leverage piece. Playing DB is when you cover a guy and it's a big field, right? You need to, especially on the Canadian field, it's a lot of space. And we also, depending on the coverage, you're asked to be in a certain position to be able to put yourself in the best position to succeed, make a play.
Yeah.
And a lot of time we have to align inside. And by you need to live and die by keeping your leverage, right?
True.
And a lot of times, people forget in business the power of leverage, and they get caught up on what's going on everywhere in the world and trying to copy people. But they realize that sometimes you just don't have the leverage to do what these other people are doing. And the step that you take in business, you need to make sure that you protect your leverage. And the leverage that you have, you acquire it as you go, right? Some people is money, some people is assets, some people is the whatever they bring to the table, their skill set. But for me, that's leverage. And in order for you to reach the level that you want to, in order to grow, you need to protect that leverage and also know what your leverage is. Sometimes people trying to make move, but they don't have the leverage to make those move and end up putting themselves in bad position. And when I look at football and I look at my business and I look at, I've always wanted to maintain my leverage. Didn't want to put myself out of position for me to make mistakes, because whatever I wanted to do in the end with the business, I needed to. It was going to take time, but in a period of growing, I needed to protect my leverage. I didn't want to put myself out of position. I didn't want to make silly moves. I didn't want to buy things and not being able to back it up, because that's what a lot of people do. They spend a lot of money early, right? And they don't have leverage to do that. They go and partner with the wrong people, and they don't have leverage to do that. What have you seen people do in business where they've put themselves out of position to succeed?
There's many things, right? I think business comes down to, especially when you're starting a business, one of the fundamental things that you have to consider starting any business is taking risk,
That's right. You have to.
right? And at the end of the day, life itself, right? Depending on how you live it, there's some level of risk involved.
That's right.
But starting a business for a lot of people, there is a lot of risk involved, right? And so one of the fundamental things I think that you need to consider before you go into business is how can you ultimately minimize your risk, right? How can you best minimize your risk, knowing that you're going to start something new, you're going to start a business? That's what it comes down to fundamentally. And there's different ways of doing it, right? There's many different ways of doing it. Ultimately, you cannot eliminate every risk.
No.
You can't.
That's right.
But as much as possible, right? As much as possible. And so that's one of the reasons why I love what I do now, is because I'm taking all that experience that I've had in business, in being in situations where I've made a lot of mistakes, right? Somebody that's been an entrepreneur for a lot of years, one of the things they'll tell you is you haven't been an entrepreneur until you sit there and payroll is coming. It's about to happen. You're about to have payroll coming up, and you look in your business account and you have no idea how you're going to pay your employees.
That's right.
Until you've been in that situation, right? For some, you haven't really lived the life of an entrepreneur.
That's right.
And I don't necessarily agree with that, right? But I've been in those situations, right? So how do you eliminate that from going into business?
Right.
And I think franchising is it's one of those things. Now, what franchising does is you're going into a proven concept, right? To become a franchisor, you need to have a proof of concept in your business, and then the way you multiply it is through franchisees, right? But we live in a world today where there's thousands and thousands of franchises. There's thousands and thousands of different businesses you can go into. Not all of them are created equal.
That's right.
That's fundamental.
That's right.
Right? And so ultimately, there's ways that you can go into business without having to bet the whole house.
That's right. But you start, and I completely agree with you, and it's right. And at times, and that's something that you learn as a business owner, is you sometimes put yourself out of position where, okay, you made certain decisions, right, that puts you in a position where now, like you said, you don't necessarily agree with that, because you should always try to make sure that you have ways to pay and cover your bills and make sure that you're okay. But sometimes you try things, you take risks, right? But these risks got to be calculated, because whatever you've accumulated, you can be at the top of the mountain, right? But because you underestimated, the reason why you're at the top of the mountain right now is because you have a lot of leverage, right? And you underestimate sometimes that power that you have, because you're trying to do certain things that in the end may not be beneficial for your business, may not be beneficial right now for your business, right? And I think timing is very important for that, right? Because if you go back to the football world, sometimes I may cheat and try and decide and play outside leverage on the coverage, because at this particular play on third down, I know that there's a high percentage of him running this route, so I'm gonna put myself in that position. But I can't just start the game like this. It's gotta be calculated. Leverage is something that you can play with, but you need to do it at the right time, because you might lose your leverage and lose your opportunity to grow out. And in football, you may not make the play in that, right? So that's why I talked about leverage, and I'm a person that consider myself a risky person. I like to take risks, because that's just how I played. When you you don't reach success without taking risks. And sometimes you know, obviously doing that, you learn the hard way sometimes. But I think in the process, you learn how to take more calculated risk,
Correct.
right? And protect your brand and protect yourself as a business owner, so where you don't have to be at the end of the month wondering how you're going to be able to pay your bills. And in franchising, how would you address someone that's trying to I want to start franchising, but you look at the health of the business and like, if you do that, your business might die, right? How would you address that?
Not every business can be a franchise. That's number one, right? You know, I help companies, you know, who have achieved some success, you know, and they may want to become a franchise. But one of the first things I tell them is not every business is meant to be a franchise, because there's so many things that have to make sense. And really what franchising comes down to is systems.
That's right.
Right? It comes down to systems. And the most successful ones that we all know of, call it the McDonald's, the Chick-fil-A's, and there's many others out there. They have great systems, and they have systems that they're able to duplicate. Right? In whether it's in US or whether it's in Canada or Sweden, right? So to create something like that, you need to have a business, and you need to have a concept that could work in multiple places with different people. Because when you award a franchise, you know, you have an investor come in, and they're basically buying your system, they're buying your proof of concept, and they're putting their money on the line because they believe in what you have, right? So what I try to help people understand, especially people who've never been into business or may have some business experience and want to get into franchising, there's a couple of things that have to make sense. One is your skill set. So the company that you want to invest in as an investor, the company that you want to invest in as a franchise, do you have the skill sets to operate that business? That's number one. And if you have the skill set, okay, do you have the finances? Right? One of the number one issues in business is you're undercapitalized, because you have to, in business, things don't always go your way, and it can be up and down. So you need to have enough capital to weather the storms.
And enough, that's right, because you need to also have enough, obviously one of the leverages pieces, financial capital, to make sure that if things don't work out, you can survive and continue to do other things.
Yes.
That's not what you're saying.
Yes, hopefully. And that comes down to eliminating your risk before you go into that business.
That's
right? And so those things are fundamental, but timing is another one, right? Is this the right time for you to investing in franchise or become a franchisor, right? So there's a lot of things that you have to consider. But I will say this, the reason why I like it is because it's a significant decision for people. And when you do it the right way, it can have a significant outcome, right? There are so many rewards in being able to get into, I call it a vehicle, right? Business or franchising, they're just different vehicles that hopefully take you on a journey that you enjoy and a destination that you want to reach. Ultimately, I think that's the reward.
That's right.
Right? So get into a vehicle, get into a concept, or do things in life that are going to allow you to enjoy the journey, because the journey is more important than the destination.
That's right. No, thank you very much for sharing that. And thank you very much for sharing a little bit about your business and talking about your personal life, talking about football experiences. I think this was a really meaningful conversation. I really appreciate your vulnerability as well in some of these in most of it. I think you're really open with the guests here, so I really appreciate with the audience here. So I really appreciate that of you. I would like to end the show with a couple questions for you.
Sure.
One of it is for you, and the other one will be for the next guest. So the first one, the Bouk Performance brand, there's something that kind of evolve over time, but the essence of it is family, and this is something that in this building, this is what we live for. It's not about only succeeding for yourself, but everybody around you has to benefit from that, and we all have to grow together. You don't only come here to work for yourself, but you're here to empower everybody else around you so we can all grow together. So family is a big word here at Bouk Performance. And I want to know, what does family means to you?
I like that question. Family for me means the people that you choose to do life with. Mm-hmm. Right? Some people see family as, the family you're born into. Mm-hmm. Family for me is the people you choose to do life with. Mm-hmm. They become your family. And for me, my family, I'd do anything for. Mm-hmm. I would be there when they need me to. Mm-hmm. And I think we all live life to ultimately to have experiences with your family, mm-hmm. right? So family to me means the people I choose to do life with.
Thank you. And that's why I do consider you family. That's something that throughout this journey, everywhere we've went, we've seen each other at our highest and at our lowest, mm-hmm. and we stuck by each other, and no matter what. And wherever we went, we were always a phone call away, and we helped each other, in a lot of different challenges in our life, but we mm-hmm. also celebrate a lot of successes together.
For sure.
And that's the beauty of the relationship that we have, the bond that we have, and I'm always going to be grateful for that. And I want to protect it at all costs. And I always love you for that. The last question I want to ask to you is, I want you to leave a question. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a guest, coming in next week. I want you to leave a question for that guest. You don't know who that is. I won't tell you who it is.
Okay.
But I want you to think about a question that you would like to ask the next guest.
I like that. Not knowing who's coming in next to the podcast. So the question I'm going to leave is, what is the defining moment in your life, and what did you learn? What is the most defining moment in your life, and what did you learn from that experience?
That's a deep question. Thank you. That I will ask that question, and I'm intrigued about the answer. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, you guys, for tuning in to the first episode of the book. Again, this is the real story. I want real and authentic people coming in and share their real story. I hope that you enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to having you watch the next episode in the next couple of weeks here. Thank you very much, Doc. And I want to end with that song again. What you know about me, boy? 25DC, boy. The best DB, boy. Knock you off your feet.
Thank you.
Boy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you. This was an honor. Love you too. Thank you very much for having me. This was great.
I appreciate you, my man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.